lesson is going to be on cultural knowledge. And instead of science, we're going to do an art lesson today. And so art, my specialisation is animation. And Disney has had a massive impact and just changed the culture of animation since 1939. Or even before that, when they made Snow White, it was just blew people's minds of what animation could be. And in 1939, two of the lead animators created these 12 steps they're called the Principles of Animation, and it's helped to create just like a baseline for animation of how to make it more believable, how to make it enjoyable, and I'll go through some of those. What do you guys think some of them could be to make an animation more believable?
The proportions or proportionality or something?
Yeah, proportions, definitely.
Like motion,
Motion. There's something
retaining,
specific about the motion.
Frame rates or something?
No.
retaining. I think is it retaining proportion in motion or like weight in motion.
Yeah, weight in motion.
Weight in
that's
motion.
that's excellent one. Because you have the very first one is almost the most important one. It's called squash and stretch, and that gives like weight and believability to all objects. You can use it for a ball. You can use it for people walking. Like, so imagine a ball, and you throw it, it bounces. Got our little parabolic curves. And then, so here it would start off as a ball, and then squash and stretch principle means that as you're throwing it, the ball kind of stretches out here, and then it gets to here, and then it's back to normal, and then as it's falling, it's stretching back out again, and then it's almost back to normal, but then when it hits the ground, kind of squashes a bit on the ground, and then it comes back to normal, stretches out as it's bouncing. And all of this does happen, but it's very, very minute, and it's hard to notice. So another step, the principles of animation, is exaggeration. And so you exaggerate these things, and then you get to pick up on them, and it also just, it's a lot more entertaining if you're doing something like exaggerated. You can actually see what's happening instead of just trying to imagine what's happening. And so all of these principles, they're not standard, but they've been used standard by everybody since that has made animation. So that's what makes Disney huge. They were the pioneers of this, and they created these sort of semi-standards, and that everybody has used since. And since animation has become a lot more mainstream recently, that's made such a huge impact on the culture and why everybody still knows Disney today, I guess. And because these principles have made them so popular, they've just got money to throw at everything, and they just buy out all the companies. And then, so using these animation principles, I'd get the students to, they'd know all these principles, they'd do their research on them, and then they'd have their own little project to do. It's for a Year 10 media arts class, but what I've noticed is media arts in schools is very lacking, and it's not until about Year 10 that they start getting into it. Before that is like electives of art and drama, like visual arts and drama. So unfortunately, the resources are pretty limited, and on my placement it wasn't until Year 10 that I noticed that I actually did anything with media arts. And so for this reason I chose Year 10, and because my specialisation is animation, and everybody loves animation, no matter how old you are. I was going to start them off with an easy one. We get like you'll know stop motion animation and how it works.
Yeah, where you record like a frame of something and then move it, and then the next you record the next frame or however long it is.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'll just get this because almost all students have their phones, or if they don't, can get the school resources, and they'd also be able to see how the whole process is involved of making an animation, such as going through pre-production, such as storyboarding, writing the story, what their intent is, what they want to achieve. Storyboarding is a description of how their narrative will take place, and all the way through to production, actually doing it. So they'd have their project, and then they'd think of what materials they'd want to use, and then they'd use their phone, just take a picture, like, I don't know, sticky tape it to the table or something so it doesn't move, and then do their thing, take a picture, move it, take a picture, and all up, I think it takes about more than 1,000 pictures, so it's pretty time consuming, but it is pretty fun to do, and especially to see the end result. And then take them through the post-production where they'd go on the computer and use the resources to put it all together and then make it into a final movie. And then that gives them an idea of how the processes run and how these companies work as well.
Is that idea similar to like, say you've got like a book, and in the corner of the book you just draw a picture and you slightly change it, and
That's
you
exactly
flick through the
it,
book and you see it sort of like, whether it's like a car going or a jump and whatever, or
That's exactly right. You just cut out the steps of pre-production, use storyboarding, and you just wing it like this. And but you still get really, really good results. And everybody does that. You always see it in school. I did millions of them. And then after that, they'd have their final videos, and then just upload them, and then do a peer review on them of each other's, and what their impression of it was, and their students would also give a description of their process and how it works, and how they felt it improved their idea of how the animation companies and their culture actually works, and how the topics are relevant to something that they want to do, because obviously if they chose it, it's an elective, it's something they're interested in. I think that's me done. Short one. I'll leave it so I get. This was for
cultural knowledge.
Yeah, because we had to choose one from that, and I thought that best fit it. I'll leave it on for feedback because I didn't bring my sheets to sign out, so you can just waffle on.
I don't know, I missed most of that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the stuff.
Oh, you can make up something awesome then, and I'll just keep that.
Look, it's probably a one or a two, because when we were talking about the cultural knowledge of, or cultural understanding and knowledge of Disney and that animation process.
I wanted to talk more about that, but I just forgot.
Yeah, that's sort of even if you go into that a little bit more depth, this element sort of to get the really high scores, you've got to offset, say, subculture versus dominant culture. And so what we were talking about there is pretty much just about what the dominant culture of that industry is, and how it was produced. And that's a good thing to understand, but it kind of is at a superficial level of cultural knowledge, because it's only focusing on the one. And so if you were to talk about, introduce, say, sub-genres into that where people have deviated from that cultural norm in different forms of animation or something along those lines, and then talk about how that's happened, why that's happened, what the effects are, and where perhaps the background of that is, so that people understand it. Like anime, like I take it, I get the impression like anime has some different animation principles to it, because it does appear so different to the Disney types. And
that's
and
what
that
I
sort of
wanted
stuff.
to talk about Disney, because it actually doesn't. Nobody deviates from these they're not standard, they're not rules, but nobody deviates from them. There are other things like follow through and secondary actions, and they're things like when a character moves and then their hair moves back with them and it flows, or their jacket goes back. And if they're running and then they stop, follow through is their jacket or their hair continuing in the motion even though they've stopped. So they're not rules, but everybody follows them. And I can't think of a single animation where other people have just not done it. So that's how Disney has made such an impact on the culture of animation.
There's got to be examples of that out there somewhere where you're talking about the difference in culture, or even
Well, there
if
would
it's
be
just
Well,
a,
maybe you need to focus on
before-
something else.
before
As
they-
in, the 12 rules of animation are what good animation is, but
Oh,
then
definitely, yeah.
what then is the cultural aspect of Disney that you don't get from
but
other
you can find some really
animations.
deliberately bad animation on YouTube and
Yeah,
stuff.
that's true.
Like maybe,
I suppose,
maybe
Which
yeah,
that's
if
part
they're
of the
deliberately
appeal,
bad,
that's
then
part of
they're
the
the
job.
ones that aren't following.
Yeah, they're countercultural, and so
Yeah.
that's where I reckon you could bring that into it, and then that would make it far more about the cultural knowledge of
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
standard accepted animation principles versus some genres or alternative genres which deliberately go against it
Yeah,
for effect of what for whatever effect they're going for.
yeah.
Like ideas kind of like stuff like salad fingers and that sort of thing. Where I feel
Well,
like
even those, they still use all the animation principles. The only
Lie
thing
to
that
the
wouldn't
kids,
is
tell them they
something,
don't.
something that's terrible would be like a stick figure walking that has no movement and they just.
Oh yeah, those
Yeah, but
stick
they- I mean,
animation
yeah,
ones.
stick
A
animation.
lot of
But
those
even-
real basic ones.
But
maybe
even
do-
those stick animations,
yeah.
they're really good. They all have follow through. there
So
is
I know nothing
almost,
about the topic, so I
there
have
is
to believe
almost
it.
nothing that I
Yeah.
can think of unless it's really, really bad.
Mm.
But then, so then if you
That
were going to
hasn't
do
had an
cultural knowledge, you'd
impact
have to
from
focus on something
Disney.
else.
Mm.
It couldn't be about quality.
Yeah.
Oh
that
yeah,
case.
true.
The
I could
animation
do the
is
quality
In that
because without these principles, the quality goes down to shit,
Yeah.
and then that's why I couldn't think of any that
Right.
wouldn't use the principles because those ones.
Or
Nobody,
yes.
yeah.
Or the alternative
Nobody
maybe
wants to watch
because
those.
you were talking about how Disney set the standard for all of this sort of stuff, and then now they own. You really went into that, or started to talk about the fact that they own all the big bucks. They buy up everything now.
Yeah.
That's a cultural thing worth looking at because then you can play that off versus smaller independent animators, how they deal with these issues of big budget versus small budget to achieve those principles of animation. And so then that's really starting to get into the nuts and guts of cultural knowledge and understanding of how they work differently. So that's possibly one way that could have worked to like get high scores on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the other thing is, I know what it's a bit like. We're trying to hit these things, but our classes just don't sort of fit these types of things that we're meant to hit for the subject. So like, intermediate arts class, how many of them want to talk about culture? Well, they just want to animate stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That's
it's-
why I wanted to focus on.
Yeah, so
practical
I get where you're
aspects.
coming from. It's,
Oh yeah, this
it's
would be a
like-
very fun lesson.
yeah.
And the 12 rules of animation are really interesting. And if you get them to draw, like, each time you cover a rule, you get them to draw or animate a little example.
Well,
So
in
that
this
they
lesson,
understand
I'd
it.
also get them involved. I'd get
Yeah,
one of them
right.
up and then I'd throw balls at them and
Oh, I could-
Yeah, I mean, if you had a like a slow motion or stop motion camera or something, and you
Yeah.
just dropped like Play-Doh or something that's going to squish, and you could do it with, but actually water balloons are great for that
yeah,
because they're very squishy. And then you showed how it kind of reforms,
yeah,
and you're like, look, if you just do this, it doesn't look good.
yeah. And then get people to walk across the room in different styles.
And throw a water balloon.
That's true. That's good too, actually.
Cool.
Cool, cool. Alright, cheers
Alright.
that, guys.
No worries.